I always knew something was off about Thursday nights. Cassie would come home late, smelling like expensive bourbon and peppermint lip balm, neither of which she owned. She said it was networking. I said nothing. I had a feeling, but I didn't want to be right. Turns out, I was. The night it all broke, it was raining. The kind of storm that drowns your city and your soul. I'd left work early because a client canceled last minute, which felt like fate now that I think about it. I parked 2 blocks from the house because I'd forgotten my key card and didn't want to wake the security guard. So I walked, in the rain, in my suit, through the side gate, into the home I'd built. The lights in the master bedroom were on. That was my first clue. Cassie always turned them off before bed. She said the ceiling fan shadows creeped her out. So either she'd grown braver, or someone else had turned them on. I took the stairs 2 at a time. No noise, no warning. The door was cracked open. I pushed it, slowly. And there they were. My wife of 6 years. My best friend of 10. Cassie, topless, laughing breathlessly into Jake's chest. Jake, shirtless, his boxer briefs on the floor like my trust. My bed, the one I financed for 12 months with 0 APR, creaked under their guilt. They didn't see me, not at first. I stood there, soaked to the bone, watching the world I knew burn in front of me. Cassie turned her head mid-giggle. Her face froze. Jake looked over his shoulder and flinched like he'd seen a ghost. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even speak. I just smiled. A slow, razor-edged smile, the kind you give before you pulled a trigger. Cassie scrambled for the sheet. Jake stood like a man caught between shame and stupidity. There was a silence so thick you could hear the mattress breathing. "Hey man, Jake started. I held up my hand. "Save it. I've seen enough." Cassie's eyes pleaded, her lips parted like she had words but none brave enough to escape. "David, I swear, it didn't mean—" "Didn't mean anything?" I snapped. "Then why'd you do it in my bed?" She shrunk. Jake took a step forward, like that would help. "You don't get to touch me," I said, stepping back. "You don't get to explain. You don't get anything anymore." Then I left, walked down the stairs, into the storm, soaked in betrayal. I didn't take anything, not my watch, not my coat, not even my dignity. Just the truth, and it was more than enough. 3 days later, I filed for divorce. Jake tried texting. Cassie tried calling. I blocked them both. I didn't show up to any of the friend group meetups. Let them whisper. Let them pick sides. But I had a plan. A beautiful, dark, poetic plan. You see, Jake's mother, Linda Hartwell, was a legend in our town. A wealthy widow, elegant, aloof, and completely off-limits. She was also stunning. I'd met her twice at parties. She always wore red. Red lipstick, red heels, red nails. Like danger wrapped in velvet. A month after the divorce was finalized, I ran into her again at a charity gala Cassie would have killed to attend. I bought her a drink. She laughed at my jokes. I asked her to dinner. She said yes. The rest? That's where this story begins. Because the moment Jake and Cassie betrayed me, I didn't just lose a wife and a friend. I gained a reason to burn everything down. And when I stood in court 3 months later, signing a marriage license next to Jake's mother, wearing a red silk dress and a smirk, I didn't just win. I became the monster they created. Jake and I met in sophomore year of high school. He was the loud one, the funny one, the kind of guy who got away with cutting class because he made the teachers laugh too hard to punish him. I was the quiet one, the planner, the fixer, the guy who made Jake look like he had his life together. We were opposites, and yet we were inseparable. He gave me chaos. I gave him structure. I let him crash on my couch after fights with his mom. He let me copy his algebra homework after all-nighters spent prepping for debate club. We were brothers in everything but blood. When Cassie first met him, she laughed harder at his jokes than she ever did at mine. I told myself that was normal. Jake had charisma. He could make a stone statue crack a smile. He was the best man at our wedding, gave a toast that had the whole room crying. If David's the heart, he said, raising his glass, then Cassie is the pulse, and I'm just lucky to witness it beat. People clapped. Cassie kissed him on the cheek. I didn't think twice. Looking back now, I should have. I remember the first time I saw a photo of just the two of them, Cassie and Jake, on her Instagram. I was in the background, out of focus, mid-laugh. The caption said, "Two souls, one vibe." It got 276 likes. One of them was mine. The night after I caught them, I scrolled through every one of her posts. I found 13 more pictures like that. Her smile slightly wider when Jake was beside her. Her body angled more toward him. The kind of small things you ignore until they scream in hindsight. I couldn't sleep, so I drove. I ended up at Jake's old apartment. He wasn't there anymore. He'd moved out when his mother sold the building. But I parked across the street and just sat for hours. I thought about all the times I defended him, covered his gambling debt, bailed him out of a DUI without telling his mom, lent him money, listened to him cry over women who never loved him. He said I was the only one who ever believed in him. And this was how he repaid me. By crawling into bed with my wife. I still remember the night we buried his father. He sobbed in my arms like a child, said he felt like a man with no anchor. I told him he had me. I said I'd always be there. And I meant it. He didn't. 3 days after I married Linda, Jake showed up at my office. He wore that same leather jacket I gave him 5 Christmases ago. It looked smaller now, maybe because the man inside it had shrunk. His hair was messy, eyes bloodshot. I almost didn't recognize him. "Don't do this," he said, standing in front of my desk like I owed him an explanation. "Do what?" I asked, not bothering to look up from my laptop. "Marry my mom," he snapped. "This isn't funny, David." "I'm not laughing," I said. "Yet." "She's using you." I smiled. "That makes 2 of us." Jake slammed his hand down. "You're ruining everything." "No, Jake. That was your job, and you nailed it." He stared at me for a long time, like he wanted to hit me, like he wanted to cry, like he couldn't tell which one would make him feel more like a man. "She's my mother," he whispered. "And Cassie was my wife," I said. "Looks like we've got a taste for ruining each other's family." He left without another word. I watched him walk down the hallway, his shoulders hunched, his fists clenched. For the first time in 10 years, I felt nothing for him. Not love, not hate, just absence. That night, I sat on the balcony of Linda's penthouse. The city lights blinked beneath us like the world was trying to wink away its sins. She handed me a glass of bourbon, her favorite, neat, no ice, and sat across from me in her velvet robe. "You saw him?" she asked. No need to clarify who. "He looked like a broken version of himself," I replied. "He always breaks when he doesn't get what he wants," she said, just like his father. I raised my glass. Then here's to broken legacies. We clinked glasses in the dark. Cassie had betrayed me. Jake had betrayed me. And now I was rewriting the family tree with fire. Next week, we'd host our engagement dinner. Invite the press, invite the drama, invite the ones who thought they got away with everything. They wanted chaos. I'd give them a symphony. The strangest part about betrayal isn't the shock. It's the silence that follows. When I pushed the bedroom door open that night and saw Cassie with Jake, time didn't explode. It evaporated. For a moment, I wasn't angry, I wasn't devastated, I wasn't anything. I was hollow. And in that hollow moment, I heard her voice, shaky, fragile, yet absurdly familiar. The same voice that used to whisper, "I love you" in the dark, was now stuttering through excuses she didn't even believe herself. "David," she breathed, the sheet clutched to her chest like it could cover more than her nakedness. I didn't speak. She blinked at me like I'd stepped out of a nightmare, her lips trembling. This isn't what it looks like. Of all the clichés in the universe, she chose that one. My wife, half naked with my best friend, still had the nerve to insult my intelligence. Jake reached for his jeans on the floor. "It was a mistake," he said quickly. "We were drunk." "You're sober now," I said, voice cold, "so say it again and see if it sounds any less pathetic." Cassie stood, the sheet falling to her waist. Her body, once mine, once sacred, now looked like evidence, like something spoiled. "Please, just listen," she said, stepping forward. "It started after the company retreat. You were so distant, always working." "So you slept with Jake?" I asked. "That's your equation? Less attention equals infidelity?" Her eyes welled up. "I didn't mean for it to happen." "People don't trip and fall into bed, Cassie." She reached for my hand. I pulled it back like she was poison. "You broke us," I said, "both of you." Jake cleared his throat, now fully dressed. "Look, man, I didn't plan this either. We were friends, yeah, but you still did it," I snapped. "You looked me in the eyes. You toasted at my wedding. You held my child when he was born." "He's not yours," Cassie blurted. The room cracked open. Silence. Then something inside me burst. "What did you say?" I whispered, each word sharp as glass. She covered her mouth, like the truth had slipped out too fast. Jake stepped back. "You're lying," I said. "You're lying to hurt me." Cassie shook her head slowly. My heart stopped. Not figuratively, literally. For a split second, I couldn't breathe. My mind spun. "You're telling me the son I've raised for 4 years, he's not mine?" Her silence said everything her lips were too cowardly to repeat. I turned away. If I'd stayed a second longer, I would have shattered everything. Her, him, the furniture, myself. Instead, I walked out, got in my car, drove nowhere, sat at a gas station off I-90 for 3 hours staring at the same flickering overhead light. She wasn't just unfaithful. She was calculated. And Jake? He wasn't just a backstabbing friend. He was a biological father who couldn't even bother to raise his own child. I thought I had lost everything. But that night, I realized something deeper. I hadn't lost everything. They had. Because now they had to live with themselves. And I was going to rebuild. Not as the broken man they left behind, but as the man who would rewrite their fate. The next morning, I called Linda. I hadn't planned to, but something in me needed to speak with someone who shared Jake's blood, if only to prove that not all of it was tainted. "David," she answered, her voice as elegant as always. "What a surprise." "Lunch?" I asked. "Today." A pause. Then, 3 o'clock, my place. When I showed up, she didn't ask why I was there. She poured wine, offered me charcuterie, and let me sit in silence until I was ready. "I caught them," I finally said. "I assumed," she replied gently. "Jake avoids me when he's ashamed." I looked at her. "You knew?" I didn't need proof. Mothers always know. "And you're not furious?" "I'm something worse," she said, disappointed. We sat for a while, staring out over the city skyline. Then she said something I didn't expect. "You know, I once dated a man who cheated on me with my best friend." I turned. "Really?" "Really," she said. "He married her? They divorced 3 years later. She took everything. He lives in Florida now, alone, in a trailer." I chuckled despite myself. "And you?" "I built an empire." That was the moment I saw her not as Jake's mother, but as her own kind of woman. And I realized revenge doesn't always look like fire and fists. Sometimes it looks like grace wrapped in steel. That's when I decided I would take everything back. My dignity, my future, and maybe, just maybe, Jake's legacy too. I still remember the way Linda walked into that restaurant, like she owned time. The maître d' straightened his collar before speaking to her. The waiter poured her wine without asking. Conversations at surrounding tables quieted for just a second as heads turned, and not because she was loud or flashy. It was the red dress. A long, curve-hugging sheath of satin that kissed the floor as she moved, slit high enough to whisper danger, neckline low enough to declare she had no use for shame. She wore it with a matching red lip and black stilettos that tapped the marble like a countdown. Jake's mother was a vision, and more importantly, she knew it. She slid into the booth across from me like this was just another afternoon, as if I wasn't a man whose life had detonated a week ago, as if she didn't know she was part of the fuse I was about to light. "David," she said, her voice smooth, "you look like you haven't slept." "I haven't," I said. She offered a faint smile. "Good, means you're still thinking." "I've been doing more than thinking." "Oh?" "I've been planning." Linda sipped her wine and waited. "I want them to pay," I said, not with fists or tabloids, but slowly, publicly, poetic justice. Linda leaned in. "And where do I come in?" "Front and center." She didn't flinch. "You want to use me to ruin my son." "No," I said, staring straight into her sharp green eyes. "I want to give him the lesson you should have." Her gaze didn't soften. "He betrayed you. He betrayed me too, in a way. But he's still my blood. And Cassie was my wife. Blood didn't stop him from taking what was mine." Silence stretched between us. Then, slowly, she nodded. "He thinks I'm weak," she said. "He always has. Because I gave him money instead of love, freedom instead of discipline." "I want to take away his pride," I said, "everything that makes him feel untouchable, and I want to do it with elegance." Linda finished her wine. "When's the wedding?" she asked. I blinked. "You're serious?" She smiled. "If we're going to put on a show, David, we might as well go Broadway." I couldn't help it. I laughed. For the first time in weeks, it wasn't hollow. 6 weeks, I said, unsure where the number came from. Enough time for invitations, enough time to let the press catch wind. "Perfect," she said, rising from the booth. "You'll need a tuxedo. I already have the dress." The wedding planning became a storm of precision. Linda handled the vendors like a general commanding her soldiers. I watched her transform from wealthy widow to a queen in motion. Jake and Cassie, of course, found out in week 2. Jake showed up at my office again, angrier, messier. He demanded an explanation. I gave him a headline. "Your mom and I are getting married," I said flatly, "and yes, you're invited. I'd hate for you to miss watching someone else steal what you thought was yours." He punched the glass door on the way out. Cassie emailed me. Just one line. "Is this real?" I didn't respond. On the night of our engagement party, Linda wore the red dress again. A statement, a warning. She took my arm as we entered the ballroom at the Langston Hotel. Cameras flashed, murmurs bloomed. People whispered names like poison. "That's Jake Hartwell's mother. She was married to Richard Hartwell. Isn't that David Wexler? Wasn't he married to... Didn't his wife cheat with Jake? My God, is this revenge?" "Exactly." Linda leaned into my shoulder and whispered, "They're staring. Let them." The speeches were brief, the champagne cold, the laughter too tight. Every time someone asked how we met, Linda said, "Through heartbreak." Every time someone asked if it was real, I said, "Real enough to hurt." Jake didn't come. But Cassie did. She wore a black dress that didn't suit her frame. Her hair was pinned in curls she never wore before, an obvious attempt to outshine a woman twice her age and 10 times her power. She approached our table with the posture of someone who didn't know whether to beg or burn. "Linda," she said. "Cassie," Linda replied, swirling her glass. Cassie's eyes flicked to me. This is insane. You know that, right? No, I said, standing slowly. What's insane is pretending you were happy with a man you betrayed in his own house. I made a mistake, she hissed. You made a decision, I said, and now I've made mine. She opened her mouth to argue, but Linda stood and gently stepped in. My dear, she said, voice like velvet draped over steel, you should go home before someone reminds you you're not on the guest list. Cassie turned red. She stormed out 5 minutes later, after spilling a glass of wine and muttering something about this circus. I toasted with Linda that night. We locked eyes across the dance floor, and for the first time since my world had crumbled, I felt in control again. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. Mine came with chilled champagne and a honeymoon suite in Venice. Linda and I didn't run away after the engagement party. We paraded forward. Invitations went out, vendors were locked in, the press circled like hawks, and every step we took together was calculated, not in secret, but on full display, because nothing hurts a narcissist more than being forgotten. And Jake and Cassie? They were fading, from public life, from reputation, from each other. Rumors began to swirl. Infidelity between Cassie and someone new, Jake's erratic behavior at business meetings, even whispers of him visiting rehab. But I wasn't paying attention to them anymore. I was too busy learning how to hold hands with the woman who raised my worst enemy and still made me feel more powerful than I ever had before. Linda wasn't young, she wasn't naive, and that's exactly what I needed. She had presence, not the kind that shrinks a room, but the kind that commands it. She didn't try to fill silence with small talk, she let it hang, let people grow uncomfortable in it, and that made her dangerous. We shared dinners like chess matches, wine poured carefully, words chosen precisely. The more time I spent with her, the more I saw what Jake had always resented. His mother had never coddled him. She had only ever offered him expectations. He didn't meet them, so he resented her. And she, in turn, left him to his own spiral. Until I came along. You're not like him, she said one night, curled up on the balcony in one of her cashmere robes. You don't run from the fire. You stand in it. I spent most of my life cleaning up his messes, I told her. Now I just want to make one he can't ignore. Careful, she warned, half smiling. I might start thinking this marriage isn't just for show. I looked at her, really looked at her. Her face held time with grace, fine lines like brushstrokes of survival. Her eyes were sharp but not unkind. Her lips, painted burgundy, curled like they knew more than they ever said aloud. I'm not sure it ever was for show, I said quietly. We didn't speak after that. She leaned into me, I let her. That was the first night I didn't feel like I was faking anything. The wedding was 6 days away when my parents called. We're confused, my mother said, her voice tight. You're marrying Linda Hartwell? Yes. Jake's mother? Yes. And this isn't some phase? No, Mom, it's not a phase. It's a decision. My father, more direct, cut in. You doing this to get back at them? Partly, I admitted, but mostly because she's the only one who hasn't lied to me. A pause. Then we'll be there, he said. The night before the wedding, I met Linda at the hotel suite where we'd be staying after the ceremony. We reviewed the guest list, confirmed the speech order, finalized the wine selection. Everything was perfect. Until she pulled out an envelope. What's that? I asked. A gift, she said, to you, from me. Inside were photographs, documents, emails, all the proof of Jake's financial theft from their family trust. Hundreds of thousands siphoned over the course of 5 years. He doesn't know I have these, she said calmly. He thinks I'm too distant to notice. Why give them to me? I asked. Because I've forgiven him, she said, but you haven't, and he needs to answer to at least one of us. My hands trembled slightly. This would destroy him. No, she corrected, stepping closer. This would expose him. You can't destroy something that already rotted from the inside. We got married in a vineyard overlooking the cliffs of Monterey. 30 guests, all carefully curated. Cassie wasn't invited. Jake declined his RSVP. I said my vows to a woman who had once been an enigma, and now was my co-conspirator. She said hers with a calm I didn't know existed in a world that had torn me apart. When we kissed, the crowd clapped politely. But I wasn't listening. I was staring down the ghost of my old life and watching it vanish in the sea breeze. That night, Linda and I lay in the bed of our suite, limbs tangled like vines, no longer actors in someone else's drama, but architects of our own design. She whispered, "Do you feel peace?" And I said, "No." She laughed. "Good. Peace is overrated. We have work to do." And we did. Because what came next wasn't peace. It was justice. I was halfway through my grilled ribeye when I saw her, Cassie, 2 tables over, alone. She wore a silk blouse too tight for her chest and too desperate for her age. Her hair was curled like always, but the roots told the truth. Lipstick too red, eyes too tired. She was trying hard and failing harder. I hadn't seen her since the wedding. She hadn't RSVP'd, didn't send a gift, but I knew she'd watched. Everyone did. The headlines were impossible to avoid. Divorced executive marries ex-wife's stepson's mother. Billionaire widow and betrayed husband say I do. Jake Hartwell now stepson of ex-best friend. Scandal or strategy? Revenge wedding sets internet on fire. Cassie had gone silent after the wedding. No Instagram posts, no tagged photos. Just a few snide comments on gossip blogs under anonymous usernames I knew were hers. So when I saw her at the restaurant Linda and I frequented, on a Thursday no less, I knew it wasn't random. It was bait. I debated ignoring her. But then she looked up and smiled, like nothing had ever happened, like she hadn't torn my life apart. So I stood, straightened my cuffs, walked over to her table. "David," she said, breathy, "what a surprise." "Cassie," I replied, "cool. I didn't know you dined here." "Just started coming," she said, tucking a stray hair behind her ear, "trying new places, new things." "New men?" I asked, dry. She laughed, still sharp. "And you're still unoriginal." She bit her lip. "Can we talk?" "We're already talking." "I mean, alone, privately." I hesitated. Curiosity got the better of me. We met the next day at a boutique cafe. Cassie wore cream-colored linen and false sincerity. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," she began. "No, you didn't," I said. "You wanted to see if I'd still chase ghosts." She blinked. "That's not fair." Neither was walking in on my best friend inside my wife. She flinched, and for a moment I saw it, the crumbling. "Jake and I aren't together anymore," she said. "Of course not. The storm he created finally drowned you." She stirred her tea without sipping. "He changed. After you married Linda. Became cold, paranoid. I think he really believed you loved her." I leaned in. "I do." She studied me. "You always loved power more than people." "No," I said. "I just stopped confusing the two." She hesitated, then reached into her purse and pulled out a velvet pouch. "This belonged to you," she said, "from our honeymoon." It was a black silk tie, monogrammed, mine. I'd forgotten it even existed. "I don't want it," I said, standing. "Wait," she called after me. "You've really moved on?" I smiled. "Cassie, I didn't just move on, I leveled up." That evening, Linda was waiting for me in the master suite. She wore a scarlet lingerie set that didn't belong in the hands of anyone but me. Red lace, high-cut hips, silk that whispered vengeance. "Rough day?" she asked, sipping wine. Ran into Cassie. "Did she cry?" "No," I said, loosening my tie. "But she blinked too much. That's the same thing." Linda laughed. I sat on the bed, watching her stretch like temptation made flesh. She was older, wiser, sexier than Cassie had ever been. "You're thinking about her," she said, not as an accusation, but as a challenge. "No," I said, crawling toward her. "I'm thinking about how lucky I am that she ruined me." "Why?" "Because it gave me you." She kissed me then, Deep, slow, measured. We made love like war, strategic, passionate, unyielding. Afterward, she lay with her head on my chest, her fingers tracing the scar on my ribs from a surgery years ago. "You're building something, David," she murmured. "I'm rebuilding." "No," she corrected. "This version of you was never broken. He just hadn't been born yet." I smiled in the dark. She was right. A week later, the lingerie arrived at Cassie's apartment, wrapped in tissue paper, hand-delivered by a courier. No note, just a receipt, marked, paid in full. And with it, I sent her a message loud and clear. I wasn't hers anymore. I never would be again. It started with a drone shot, golden cliffs, white roses, a sea breeze that played with Linda's hair just enough to look staged, but not rehearsed. She stepped out of the vintage Rolls-Royce in a champagne silk gown that shimmered like poured light. I stood at the altar beneath an arch of white orchids and vengeance, wearing the same smile I had the day I walked in on Cassie and Jake, sharp, patient, unbreakable. The drone hovered, circling the scene as violinists played an orchestral version of Toxic by Britney Spears. Petty? Absolutely. Intentional? Even more so. The video went live within hours. One of our guests, a fashion influencer with 3 million followers, posted a 30-second highlight reel with the caption, "When your ex-wife cheats on you with your best friend, so you marry his mother." By midnight, it had over 8.4 million views. By morning, it was a meme. "Tell me this isn't real," Jake texted. I didn't reply. He called. I let it ring. Cassie messaged me on Instagram. "You humiliated me." I typed and deleted 20 replies before settling on 2 words. "You started." The media couldn't get enough. The vows that slapped back. From divorced to daddy, husband levels up to stepdad. Mother-in-law, more like mother of vengeance. We didn't do interviews. We didn't need to. The internet did the talking for us. But the whispers in real life were louder. Clients asked questions. Partners laughed too hard in meetings. Jake's family stopped inviting him to holidays, uncomfortable with the idea of David, the son-in-law, showing up with the matriarch on his arm. And then there were the invitations. TV shows, brand deals, panel appearances. People wanted to know if it was love, revenge, or both. Linda and I declined them all, because the real show wasn't on television. It was in Jake's inbox. That same week, our attorneys served him with formal allegations of financial misconduct, embezzlement, wire fraud, breach of fiduciary duty. He had been siphoning money from the family trust since 2018, and we had the paper trail to prove it. He called Linda the moment he got the notice. "You're suing me?" he yelled. "No," she said. "David is." "You're letting him ruin me?" "No, Jake. I'm letting him finish what you started." She hung up before he could cry. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. A man who had taken everything from me, my marriage, my trust, my dignity, was now begging to keep the one thing that mattered to him, his legacy. Too late. He tried to settle, offered us a deal, return the funds, issue a public apology, resign quietly from the board. We said no. He went public, played the victim, claimed emotional manipulation, said Linda was coerced, painted me as a predator with an Oedipal complex. It backfired. The same influencer who posted our wedding video found old footage of Jake at our wedding to Cassie, gushing about our love, crying during my vows, calling me the brother I never had. She uploaded a comparison clip titled, "When the groom becomes the stepdad, a masterclass in poetic justice." 12 million views in 2 days. Linda and I hosted a quiet dinner to celebrate the viral chaos. Just us, no guests. Candlelight, filet mignon, and Bordeaux. "Is it everything you hoped it would be?" she asked, twirling her wine. "It's not about the wedding," I said. "It's about the reckoning." She nodded. "And the man you've become?" I took a moment. "The man I used to be, safe, predictable, forgiving, had been buried in a casket Cassie and Jake hammered shut. What rose from that grave wasn't a villain. It was an architect, a man who no longer waited for justice to arrive, but built it with his own hands. "I've become necessary," I said. Linda smiled, and dangerous. As we cleared the plates, she handed me a slim black folder. "What's this?" I asked. Phase 2. Inside was a list of names. Board members, investors, enemies of Jake, old and new. "If you want to take everything," she said, "you'll need allies." I said, "You already gave me the power. Now you're giving me the map?" She reached across the table, touched my wrist. "No," she said softly, "I'm giving you the throne." It hit her at the grocery store. Cassie was in aisle 6, frozen vegetables in one hand, a bottle of overpriced organic juice in the other, when she saw the headline on a tabloid cover by the register. "From wife to stepdaughter, scandal's new low." Her picture, poorly lit and mid-blink, was next to mine, polished, composed, triumphant. And below that? A perfectly angled photo of Linda and me on our honeymoon in Venice, her hand on my chest, my ring finger gleaming. Cassie left the groceries in the cart and walked out. She showed up at our house 2 hours later. Linda answered the door. I watched from the upstairs landing, out of sight but close enough to hear the tension knot between them. "Where is he?" Cassie snapped. Linda didn't move. "Which he are you referring to? Your ex-husband or your new stepfather?" Cassie clenched her jaw. "You think this is funny?" I think Irides always had a cruel sense of humor. Cassie tried to push past her, but Linda stepped into the doorway like a fortress. She wasn't yelling, she wasn't trembling, she was simply still, and that, somehow, made her more dangerous than any scream could. "Jake's spiraling," Cassie said. "He's drinking again. He's paranoid. You destroyed him." "No," Linda said. "He destroyed himself. We just turned on the lights so everyone could see it." I stepped down the stairs. Slowly. Cassie turned, her eyes landing on me like twin grenades with pulled pins. "You've made your point," she hissed. "You embarrassed us, humiliated Jake." "Correction," I said. "Jake embarrassed himself. I simply documented it." She stormed forward. "I was your wife, David." "And now you're my stepdaughter," I said, cold. "Do you need me to draw you a family tree?" Linda smirked behind me, silent and unshaken. Cassie's hands balled into fists. What kind of man does this? I stepped closer. The kind of man who spent 6 years loving someone who never deserved him. The kind who walked in on betrayal and walked out with a plan. The kind of man who doesn't burn things down for revenge. He rebuilds the fire and invites everyone who tried to destroy him to sit inside it. She blinked. Once, twice. Then whispered, "You'll regret this." I leaned in, so close she could see the reflection of herself in my eyes. "I already regretted you." She turned and walked out. Slamming the door didn't make her exit any louder than the silence she left behind. The next morning, the family attorney called. "Cassie is contesting the will," he said. "She's claiming undue influence, says the marriage between you and Linda was orchestrated to remove Jake and her from the Hartwell inheritance." I smiled. Good. Let her try. We'd already anticipated this. Linda had met with her legal team weeks before the wedding, restructuring the trust, carving Jake out with surgical precision. Cassie was never even written in. But the court case meant publicity, and the publicity meant pressure. Jake responded with his usual flair for stupidity. He went on a podcast. The host was a hack, an ex-reality star who'd turned bitterness into a platform, but the episode went viral anyway. Jake called Linda a manipulative ice queen. He called me a leech who preyed on a grieving widow. He called Cassie a misled woman, taken advantage of. He cried on air. He begged for forgiveness. And for a moment, the public tilted in his favor. Until someone, probably Linda, leaked the embezzlement files. Suddenly, Jake wasn't a heartbroken son. He was a thief. And I wasn't a predator. I was the man who exposed a criminal. Cassie tried again. This time a handwritten letter. Delivered by courier. Cream envelope, wax seal. Inside, David. We were once everything to each other. Maybe I betrayed you, but it wasn't out of hate. It was weakness. I miss who we were before the world got in the way. I'm sorry. Cassie. I read it once, then burned it in the fireplace while Linda poured us 2 glasses of champagne. To closure, she said, raising her glass. No, I corrected, to evolution. That week, Forbes released its annual Power Couples list. There we were, Linda Hartwell and David Wexler, mother and stepfather to Cassie and Jake, and living proof that sometimes revenge isn't about screaming, it's about winning, loudly. Jake cried in a boardroom full of men he used to intimidate, not sobbing, not weeping, just crumbling. Silent tears on a marble conference table as the Hartwell Corporation officially voted to remove him as Chief Strategy Officer, citing ethical misconduct, financial opacity, and irreparable brand damage. I watched from the other end of the table, hands folded, face neutral, tie navy, victory slow burning under my skin like bourbon on an empty stomach. I gave my life to this company, Jake said quietly, his voice cracking. No, Linda corrected him, seated beside me in a tailored slate gray pantsuit. Your father gave his life to it. You just siphoned money from its veins. The room said nothing. No one dared. These were old men, conservative, cautious, but none of them were blind. They saw what Jake had become. Or maybe they finally saw what he always was. Motion carried, the chairman said after the vote. Just like that, Jake was gone. He didn't look at me on his way out, but I watched him. I watched a man who once called me brother walk out of the empire he thought he owned, while I sat next to the woman who gave him life and just helped bury the rest of it. Cassie didn't handle it any better. She showed up that evening, uninvited, unannounced, and unhinged. She was already shouting before the gate even closed behind her. You ruined him, she screamed from the courtyard. You're both sip. Linda didn't flinch. She sipped her tea on the veranda while I descended the stairs like a man arriving to his own coronation. Funny, I said. I remember you helping him. Cassie stormed up to me, mascara already bleeding from some earlier fit of rage. I want to know what you're getting out of this, she said. What is this all for? Publicity? Revenge? You two don't even love each other. Love is a luxury, I said coolly. Justice is a necessity. She laughed, a bitter, hollow thing. You think you're righteous? You're not. You're petty. You married my ex's mother. You turned a private betrayal into a circus. No, I replied, stepping closer. You turned it into a betrayal. I turned it into a lesson. Cassie stared at me, eyes glassy. Do you still think about us? I leaned in. Only when I need a reason to smile. Her mouth trembled, her hands clenched, but there was nothing left to throw. Linda rose from her chair then, elegant, gliding toward us like a verdict in heels. You should go, she said to Cassie, calm and lethal. Your tantrums don't match the architecture. Cassie blinked rapidly, trying not to cry, trying to find some final blow. But she didn't have one, so she left. Again. That night, Linda and I toasted, not to Jake's fall, not to Cassie's breakdown, but to the truth. To the moment people stop pretending, I said. To the moment people start watching, she replied. The press had already begun writing new headlines. Jake Hartwell out at family company following scandal. Stepfather becomes power player in Hartwell takeover. From adultery to authority, David Wexler's unbelievable rise. And somewhere, in some cheap apartment, probably paid with stolen money, Jake was reading every word. Cassie, too, curling up with old regrets and cold wine, realizing too late that not all losses are reversible. But the real victory came later. Linda and I received a letter from Jake. No lawyer, no threats, just words. You won. I don't know who I am anymore. You took everything, and I think that's exactly what I deserved. I folded it twice, then fed it into the fireplace. Linda kissed my temple as the flames devoured it. No response? She asked. Silence is the loudest. I started smiling more after that. Not a forced smile, not the tight one I wore through years of pretending my marriage was solid, not the bitter one I'd used when the revenge began. A real smile. The kind that says, I'm not just surviving anymore. I've arrived. It began with a sealed envelope. Thick, cream-colored paper, embossed, no return address. Linda found it sitting on her desk one morning. No courier, no note, just her name written in her late husband's unmistakable script. Richard Hartwell had been dead for almost a decade, yet here he was, speaking from the grave. She opened it slowly, like it might bleed. Inside was a revised version of his last will and testament, signed, witnessed, and notarized 3 months before his death. Different from the one Jake had presented to the board after Richard passed. The key difference? A codicil. A single, devastating paragraph that changed everything. In the event my son, Jacob Charles Hartwell, demonstrates gross misconduct, breach of trust, or damages the reputation of the Hartwell legacy in a verifiable way, all fiduciary rights, assets, and access will be permanently revoked and reallocated to my legal spouse or her appointed proxy. Richard had left a kill switch, and Jake had just flipped it. Linda read the document 3 times, then slid it across the table to me without a word. By the time I finished, I was already strategizing. You're his legal spouse, I said, but now I'm your proxy. Linda nodded, which means you now legally control everything Jake thought he inherited. Everything he tried to steal, I corrected. A pause. Then, let's make it official. We gathered the board again. Same room, same marble table. Jake wasn't invited this time. Linda stood at the head while I took her usual seat, watching her like a student watches a master. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't grandstand. She simply presented the document, along with the embezzlement findings, the podcast transcripts, and the legal motion for permanent inheritance transfer. There was no vote needed. The transfer of power wasn't a suggestion. It was law. By dusk, Jake was no longer just out of the company. He was disinherited. No trust fund, no real estate, no offshore accounts, no residuals, not even the beach house in Malibu he used to parade girlfriends through like trophies. It was all mine now. Not because I wanted the money, because I wanted him to feel the void. To know what it meant to walk into a house he grew up in and find his name scrubbed from the title deed. To know his father's legacy now bore my signature. He showed up the next morning. Not with lawyers, not with police, just with tears. Please, he said, standing outside the gates like a ghost. I have nothing left. I didn't open the gate. I let him speak through the intercom, let him plead through static. I know I messed up. I know I deserve most of it, but not everything. You took everything, David. Everything. No, I said, pressing the mic button. You gave it away, one bad decision at a time. Silence. Then, broken. What do I do now? You learn, I said, what it feels like to lose something you thought was yours forever. Then I cut the line. Later that evening, Cassie called Linda. Not me, Linda. She begged for a meeting, said she wanted to make things right. Linda poured herself a drink. Tell her to meet me at the estate, alone, tomorrow at noon. Why not me? I asked. Because some knives, she said with a thin smile, are best handled by women. The next day, Cassie walked up the same cobblestone path she used to strut as a wife. She wore beige, soft tones, minimal makeup, the aesthetic of someone trying to appear humbled, reformed. It didn't suit her. Linda met her in the rose garden. Cassie offered a weak smile. I know you hate me. Linda sipped her tea. I don't hate you. I simply outgrew your drama. I just want to apologize. I never meant to hurt. Linda cut her off with a raised hand. You wanted to win, she said, but you never knew what game we were playing. Cassie's eyes filled. I've lost everything. Not everything, Linda replied, setting her cup down. You still have a mirror. Use it. Cassie stood, her lip quivering. So that's it? No forgiveness? Forgiveness is for people who make mistakes. You made choices. She left without another word. Linda didn't watch her go. That night, we opened a bottle of Richard's Last Vintage, a 1985 Bordeaux he'd always said was for the end of something beautiful or the beginning of something brutal. It tasted like victory, like legacy, like blood finally cleaned from the blade. The invitation was simple. No gold foil, no engraving, just black serif on ivory cardstock. Hartwell Estate dinner, private family gathering, one night only. The kind of invitation that doesn't ask for RSVPs. The kind that promises closure or war. It had been 2 months since Jake lost everything, since the will turned against him, since his name, once synonymous with power, was now whispered with pity. And yet, when he walked through the double doors of the Hartwell dining hall that evening, dressed in a navy suit a size too loose, he still looked like a man clinging to a title no longer his. Cassie followed behind him. She wore black again, subtle jewelry, a faint bruise beneath her makeup where the internet's rumors hadn't been wrong. They weren't together anymore. But pain has a way of keeping enemies close when shame keeps everyone else away. The dining room looked the same as it always had. Grand chandelier, 30-foot table, candelabras flickering like ghosts of decisions past. Except this time, only 5 chairs were set. Linda at the head, me to her right, Jake, Cassie, and the family attorney across from us. The food was untouched. The silence thick. Jake cleared his throat. Why are we here? Linda didn't look up from her wine. To bury what's left of this family. I didn't ask for this war. No, I said, but you drew first blood. Cassie leaned forward. Then let's end it. No more press, no more leaks, no more humiliation. Linda swirled her glass. You want peace now? Jake's voice cracked. We were a family. No, I said. We were a lie, held together by shared delusion, and you, both of you, lit the match. He looked at me, pale, defeated. So what do you want? An apology? I stood slowly. This isn't about apologies. This is about acknowledgments, about watching you both sit in the ruins you created, about making sure the world never forgets who pulled the trigger first. Jake lowered his head. I lost everything, he whispered. No, Linda said sharply. You lost what you never earned. And now it's time you understand what true consequence feels like. She nodded to the attorney. He opened a folder and slid it across the table. A single-page agreement. Final severance. A formal severance of all ties to the Hartwell legacy. Assets, trusts, trademarks, rights to the name, and even a legally binding gag order. Sign it and walk away quietly. Or refuse, and we go public with the unedited files, the offshore accounts, the missing foundation funds tied to his name. Jake didn't speak for a long time. Then he picked up the pen, signed his name with a shaking hand. Cassie said nothing. She just watched, lips tight, face unreadable. She had already become a ghost in this house. And ghosts don't speak. After they left, Linda and I remained at the table. No one touched the food. There was nothing left to feast on. Just the aftertaste of power reclaimed. This house feels different, I said. Because it's finally clean, Linda replied. 2 days later, we changed the name on the front gate, from the Hartwell Estate to Wexler House. The press exploded. Jake disappeared. Cassie moved to the East Coast. I only know because she tried to sell one of my old watches online under a fake profile. She got $600 for it. I paid $15,000. Poetic. That night, Linda and I stood by the fireplace, glasses in hand, as the new family crest was hung over the mantel. 2 initials, intertwined. DW and LH. Legacy rewritten. Empire reborn. I looked at the woman beside me, the mother of the man who once stole my life. And I realized something. I hadn't just ended a dynasty. I'd built my own. The email came at 2:14 a.m. Subject line, "Can we talk?" Sender, Cassie Hartwell. Or rather, Cassie Layton, her maiden name now reclaimed like it meant something. It wasn't long. "David, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to say this. I was wrong. About everything. About you, about us. I didn't understand what I had until I destroyed it. I'm not asking for anything, just a conversation. Please, Cassie." I stared at it for a while. The kind of long, quiet stare you give to a dying fire, remembering the warmth it used to offer, but not missing the burn. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to Linda. She wrote back in 5 words, "Shall I draft an invoice?" 3 days later, I met Cassie in a hotel lounge downtown. Not because I wanted to, because I wanted to end this on my terms. She sat by the window, nursing a watered-down gin and tonic. She looked different, hollowed out. Expensive coat, cheap perfume. Her hair was darker now, maybe to seem more serious, or maybe grief had colored it. "Thank you," she said, voice small. "I have 20 minutes, I replied, checking my watch. I wanted to tell you that I know what I did. I know I ruined us." "You didn't ruin us," I said. "You ruined you. I just stopped protecting your version of the story." She nodded, looked down. "You were always better than me." "No," I said. "I was just honest. You mistook that for weakness." She wiped at the corner of her eye. "I think about it every day." I leaned back. "Good. That means I won." Cassie flinched, then reached into her bag and pulled out a manila folder. "I brought something. I did some math. Rough estimates. What I took, what I cost you, emotionally, financially, reputationally." She slid it across the table. Inside, a breakdown. Cost of marriage counseling I attended alone, $8,400. Watches, suits, and gifts borrowed and never returned, $12,300. Stolen hours of peace, incalculable. Child support you paid, for a son that wasn't biologically yours, $52,000. Betrayal, pain, humiliation, priceless. At the bottom, total due, $72,700. Cassie looked at me, eyes trembling. "I want to pay it back, all of it. I want to make it right." I smiled. "Done." She blinked. "Wait, what?" "I accept," I said, standing. "I'll have my legal team send you an invoice. No rush. Payment plans available." "David," she whispered. But I was already walking away. And at the exit, I paused, turned back, and said what needed saying. "You don't get forgiveness." Cassie opened her mouth. "You get debt." Linda laughed when I told her. "I never thought you'd actually take her up on it." "I won't cash it," I said, "but I'll frame it." "You're colder than me now," she smiled. "Only to the ones who tried to burn me." A week later, Cassie wired the first installment, $5,000, labeled Pain and Damages. Linda framed the receipt and hung it in the library, right beneath a portrait of the estate. A trophy, a relic, proof that even apologies have interest. Jake's downfall had been quiet until it wasn't. The tabloids had moved on. The business world had erased him. The family had disowned him. But the internet? The internet never forgets. It only waits for the perfect punchline. And it got one. On a Wednesday morning, TMZ dropped a leak. Jake Hartwell's secret divorce, Cassie Layton files after public meltdown. There were photos. Cassie leaving a courthouse in sunglasses in shame. Head down, jaw clenched, holding a Starbucks like it might save him from reality. The headline trended for 36 hours. Not because people cared about them anymore, but because people love a good loop of karma. The man who stole another man's wife lost her. The woman who betrayed her husband was now publicly betrayed by the man she broke him for. It was poetic, No one sang a sad song. I got the divorce filing forwarded to me by a mutual friend. I didn't ask for it. I didn't have to. Cassie cited emotional instability, verbal aggression, and irreconcilable shame. The press had a field day with that last one. My favorite comment online read, "Imagine cheating with your husband's best friend just to end up legally changing your name back in front of the same judge who married you." I didn't post it, but I liked it, twice. Linda found it all amusing. "I always wondered how long she'd tolerate being a footnote," she said over coffee, flipping through the gossip section like it was Sudoku. "She loved the chaos," I replied. "She mistook it for attention. She mistook a lot of things." Linda raised a brow, including Jake for a man. That week, I received a box in the mail. No return address. Inside, a photo album. Our wedding, mine and Cassie's. Dozens of images, laughing, dancing, holding hands. Her veil, my vows. Jake as best man, standing behind me like a loaded gun I didn't know was cocked. At the bottom, a note in Cassie's handwriting. "I wanted you to have these. You deserved the memories, even if I ruined the meaning." I closed the album, walked out to the terrace, and dropped it into the fire pit. It curled into ash in less than 6 minutes. Time heals, but fire forgets. Jake tried one more stunt. He went on a live stream, a shaky, poorly lit apology to everyone he'd hurt, to his mother, to me, to Cassie, to the family name. He cried again, but this time no one watched. The live stream peaked at 37 viewers, most of them trolls. He'd lost his audience, and with it, his power. Meanwhile, Linda and I thrived. She returned to the board, not as a figurehead, but as a force. I launched a philanthropic foundation in my name, fully funded by former Hartwell assets. We hosted charity galas, endowed scholarships, signed books and papers and deals. The press stopped calling us scandalous. They started calling us visionary. Funny how quickly the world forgives when you win long enough. Cassie officially finalized her divorce 5 weeks after filing. No assets, no press conference, no closure. Just a quiet, signed name on a dotted line. The same way she had ended ours. The circle was closed. The shame complete. And for the first time since that night I found them in my bed, I felt nothing. Not hate, not love, just peace. The ballroom sparkled like revenge dipped in gold. It was the annual Wexler Foundation Gala, our second year hosting, but the first where no one whispered behind napkins. The scandal had faded. The empire had stabilized. And the guests who once came for gossip now came for prestige. Linda stood across the room in a floor-length emerald gown, talking with a senator's wife and a Forbes editor like she was born to do it. Maybe she was. I watched her laugh softly, her eyes darting to find me through the crowd. They landed. She smiled. I raised my glass. And for the first time in my life, I felt taller than the walls around me. The speeches began an hour in. The chairman introduced me with a string of titles I didn't ask for. Philanthropist, entrepreneur, turnaround strategist, man of the hour. I stepped up to the podium, cleared my throat, and looked out over a crowd that once questioned my worth. "I wasn't always a name on this invitation," I began. "I used to be a footnote in someone else's story. Quiet, steady, replaceable." A few knowing smiles. Then something happened. Or rather, something broke. I paused. Sometimes life rips everything out of your hands. Your marriage, your friendships, your identity. And all you're left with is 2 choices. Build again or disappear. I raised my glass. This is for the ones who tried to break me. A soft wave of murmurs, some confused, some understanding, some guilty. This is for the ones who thought betrayal was a shortcut, who mistook kindness for weakness, who assumed silence meant surrender. I smiled. Thank you for underestimating me. A hush fell over the room. Then the applause came. Not polite, powerful, earned. Afterward, I stood alone near the balcony. Fresh air, city lights, and the low thrum of a jazz quartet bleeding through the glass. Cassie never showed. Neither did Jake. Of course not. They weren't on the guest list. But a reporter did ask about them, on background, off the record. Any message for the people who, let's say, set this all in motion? I took a sip of champagne. Tell them thank you, I said. Tell them they woke something up. Later that night, Linda found me in the study, loosening my tie. You did well, she said, sliding beside me. They listened. They believed, I corrected. You finally believe it too, don't you? I thought for a moment. I do. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a small box. Velvet, midnight blue. I opened it. Inside, a gold cufflink engraved with 3 initials. D.W.H. David Wexler Hartwell. I looked up. She nodded. It's time. A name once borrowed, now inherited. Not by marriage, by merit. We toasted again, not with champagne, but with bourbon. To endings that made space for beginnings. To enemies who taught us more than friends ever could. To the beautiful cruelty of consequences. I saw Jake again. Not in court, not on a gossip blog, not even on purpose. It was a random Tuesday afternoon. I had just left a foundation meeting and decided to stop at the bookstore downtown, one of those cozy, old-world shops with creaky floors and more silence than customers. He was sitting alone in the cafe corner, a chipped laptop open, fingers hovering over keys like he didn't know where to begin. His suit was wrinkled, his hair longer, eyes sunken. There was no ring on his finger, no light in his face. He looked up, saw me, and froze. For one quiet second, the world held its breath. Then he stood. "David," he said, voice thin, "it's been a while." It has. He looked around, as if unsure whether he was allowed to exist in my space. "You look good." "I am good." He nodded, eyes dropping to his shoes. "I heard about the foundation, the expansion, the work you've done. It's impressive. Thank you." Silence. Then, I lost everything. I said nothing. Jake shifted. "I'm working freelance, some startups. It's not much, but it's something." I nodded. Everyone has to start somewhere. He stared at me. "I still think about what I did." "Good. I'm sorry." "I believe you," I said, "but that doesn't change anything." He looked like he wanted to say more. I didn't let him. "I found peace, Jake," I said, "not by forgiving you, but by building something so complete you can't touch it." His eyes shimmered. "I miss when we were friends." I took a slow breath. I don't. Then I turned and walked away. Not angry, not triumphant, just free. Cassie sent me a postcard a few weeks later. A beach in Spain. The handwriting slightly messier than before. "David, I'm working with a nonprofit here. Nothing glamorous, but honest. I think I finally understand what that word means. No need to write back. Just thank you for letting me fall. It was the only way I could learn how to stand. -C. I didn't frame it. I didn't burn it either. I tucked it into a drawer. A quiet memory, no longer sharp enough to cut. Linda and I celebrated our 3rd anniversary with a trip to the Amalfi Coast. No press, no statements, just us. She read poetry aloud on the balcony. I cooked pasta badly. We danced barefoot in the kitchen, spilled wine on the tiles, kissed like time was ours to waste. At one point, she looked at me and said, "You don't flinch anymore when you talk about the past." And I realized she was right. Because when peace comes, it doesn't ask permission. It simply arrives, quiet, undeniable, and plants itself like a flag on the hill you bled for. I still have the cufflink. D.W.H. A name born of betrayal, reclaimed in fire, worn like armor now. And when people ask how I survived it all, the lies, the infidelity, the collapse of everything I once trusted, I tell them the truth. I didn't just survive. I transformed. Because revenge might feel good, but peace feels permanent.